had so many people over the years now that have said to me, I've read a lot of stuff or listened to talks or watched stuff on content marketing and never made sense until I read They Ask You Answer. And then it all made sense. And again, that's because I didn't want to sound like a marketer. There's not a bunch of acronyms in that book. I'm not suffering from the curse of knowledge, which is a lesson for really all of us that are trying to produce content and win trust.
Yeah, totally. Why do you think people don't get it until they read your book? Is it because it's the marketers sort of making it sound more complicated than it has to be, or is it just that they just haven't thought about it?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of failures that are happening out there. I think one of the big failures is that marketers tend to speak like marketers, and what that does is it turns off most people.
Welcome back to Digital Marketing from the Coalface. Now, ever since we started the show, and we're on episode, 52, 53? Julie?
Something
like that? Yeah.
I've lost count.
It's pretty much every episode, and I mean this, we've mentioned a book called They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. And what we thought we would do is we thought we would reach out to Marcus, and we thought Marcus would say, oh yeah, sorry guys, too busy. But you know what he didn't? He actually said, yeah, love to come and talk. So we'd love to introduce everyone who doesn't already know about Marcus to Marcus Sheridan, the author of the book They Ask You Answer. Marcus, thanks for coming on.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
That's good.
Today, and I think we're going to have a great conversation.
I think we are.
Really looking forward to this one.
I think to kick things off, I think Julie and I are both, familiar with the story, the whole River Pools thing and everything else, and you becoming the pool guy and all that stuff. But it'd be lovely to hear kind of a potted history of, where you were, where you are now, how you got there, that kind of thing. That'd be super.
Yeah, I'll give everybody the quick 101. I started a swimming pool company in 2001 out of university called River Pools with two buddies. Things were going okay. We were fighting to, grow it and survive up until about late 2008, and that was when the crash was. And a lot of people remember that. And I remember the day of the crash, because it happened very suddenly for those that weren't around to really observe it in 2008. Very, very suddenly. And I can recall within 48 hours of the crash, we had lost 5 deposits of people that had said, hey, we're going to get a pool. So they withdrew that deposit. So we lost $250,000 in business in the first 48 hours. And then over the coming weeks, it got worse and worse. And by January of 2009, I thought we were going to file bankruptcy and I was going to lose my home. My 2 business partners were going to lose their homes. And at the time, I thought my 16 employees, I was going to have to let them go. And so that's the beauty of pain and stress, though, right? Is it forces us to do things and think about things and consider things that we hadn't thought about and done and considered before. So that's when I started to really lean into the internet and learn about it. And things like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media, blogging, all this stuff that I hadn't really paid much attention to before. As I was studying it, what it's essentially said to me is, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions and you're willing to address them on your website, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you just might save your business. So I said, well, shoot. I mean, I think I can probably do this. If there's one thing I can do is listen and talk about it. I can teach about it, write about it, right? And so that's what I started doing. I can recall this was in 2009. I sat and brainstormed at my kitchen table one night all the questions I'd ever received that I can recall receiving in a home with someone that was asking about swimming pools. And then one by one, over the next couple of years, I would answer those. Usually every single night, one article or one video that I would produce. Make a long story short, it became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world and completely changed the business. We exploded and got us through the hard times. And then we became a manufacturer of fiberglass pools, and then we became the first franchise of fiberglass pools. And now there's River Pools of all these different cities in the U.S. It continues to blow up. And the last thing I'll say is it was during this process I just started a personal blog, and I started writing about what I had achieved, not really achieved, but what I was seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
this is the sales line.
Yeah, it was a sales line in late 2009. I knew something was up, and I was like, everybody should know about this. And so that started to take off, and then companies started to say, can you teach me that? Can you show me how to do that? Can you speak from our stage? Before I knew it, I was speaking. By 2012, I was speaking full-time, the company River Pools was off to the races. I'd started an agency. The agency eventually became Impact,
Mhm.
and today it's got about 70 employees. And we help implement this thing called They Ask You Answer all over the world. And the book They Ask You Answer, of course, came as a result of all of this about 4 years ago. And what's crazy about the book is it has continued to increase in sales every year since it was published, which is
Mhm.
extremely rare
Yeah.
for most books. It's taken off. It's huge in the UK. It's just been absolutely cool to see it happen, and it just resonates with people. And it's the one of the least theoretical, most practical sales and marketing books you'll ever read in your life.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons that we're huge fans of it. And looking at the Amazon reviews, 92% of the reviews are 4 or 5 star reviews. I mean, people just love it, and they particularly like the fact that they understand it and they can see how they can just go right ahead and implement it and use it as a blueprint, if you like. And I guess the basic premise of the book was to give people that blueprint.
Well, you say something there, David. I think it's actually really, really important. I didn't write the book to sound smart, and I didn't write the book to appeal to marketers. I wrote the book so anybody, especially a business owner, a CEO, could read it and say, this is so obvious. Why are we not doing this?
Yeah.
And see, and that's to me the definition of great communication is when we say something and it's so clear and so understandable that the person that's listening is like, that totally makes sense. Of course, why would we not be doing that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I had so many people over the years now that have said to me, I've read a lot of stuff or listened to talks or watched stuff on content marketing and never made sense until I read They Ask You Answer. And then it all made sense. And again, that's because I didn't want to sound like a marketer. There's not a bunch of acronyms in that book. I'm not
Yeah.
suffering from the curse of knowledge, which is a lesson for really all of us that are trying to produce content and win trust.
Yeah, totally. So, why do you think people don't get it until they read your book? Is it because it's the marketers sort of
Yes.
making it sound
Yeah.
more complicated than it has to be, or is it just that they just haven't thought about it?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of failures that are happening out there. I think one of the big failures is that marketers tend to speak like marketers. I mean, if you go online right now and you typed content marketing and you look for the definition of content marketing, you would see a definition written by marketers for marketers.
Yeah.
And what that does is it turns off most people, because if you think of where most of the influence in a company happens, it happens within leadership and sales teams. That's where most of the influence
And
occurs.
finance.
That's right. And so if they're not getting it, nobody's going to get it. Probably
Yeah.
it's not. They're going to be, going to be met with resistance. This is also why there's so many marketers out there that are frustrated because I get these emails all the time. It's like, Marcus, I don't understand. It's like, I feel like we should be doing this, this, and this. My leadership team just doesn't see it, or my sales team doesn't see it. And I'm just getting pushback and resistance. And, and so a big part of the reason is because of the fact that, we speak of it from a marketing context. So we got to learn to change our language. Somebody told me something one time that I thought was really beautiful. And it very much applies to the way we communicate online. And that is this: it's dumb not to dumb it down. And we oftentimes communicate in a way, whether it's over video or over text or whatever, to try to impress our audience. And you can actually subtly pick up on this. In fact, anybody that's watching this or listening to this right now, there's been times when you've been on YouTube, let's say, and you looked at a thumbnail. Before you even clicked on the video, you're like, I don't like that guy. Now, what makes you say, I don't like that guy? Because the person was trying to, and they didn't even know it, but they were trying to look intelligent or smart. And therefore, you were saying, oh, this person thinks they're smarter than me before you'd even watched a second of the video.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's the same thing when you start reading a post online, reading content online is do they immediately win your trust? Because they're speaking in a way almost like you're talking at the coffee shop, right? And so if I don't come across that way in this conversation, I failed our listeners today.
Sure.
Right? So I think that's a big part of it, Julie. I mean, look, there's other things too. We tend to this day, there's this there's a huge problem when it comes to understanding the trends in the marketplace. One of the biggest trends that every business owner should understand, every sales team needs to understand. We talk about it at the beginning of the They Ask You Answer, and I mention this almost in every talk, which is how on average today's buyer is 80% through the buyer's journey before they reach out to a company.
Yeah.
And so essentially, marketing is roughly handling 80% of the quote sales cycle today. And this is average. Sales is handling 20% on average.
Yeah, I've heard
Now,
that.
if you know this, you have to say to yourself, "Oh my gosh, what does this mean? What does this mean for sales and marketing?" It means marketing should have a clear seat at the table, right? That
Yeah.
is the leadership team, which oftentimes it does not. It means that sales needs to become more involved on the marketing side of the business. It means that marketing needs to be more responsible for ROI and actual revenue, not just fluffy metrics that don't mean squat in terms of paying your bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And this number is only going to grow over the course of time. So if it's only going to grow, we as an organization have got to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to adjust?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think, do you think having sales and marketing teams is almost a thing of the past, and they should just be all together, like one team?
Revenue generation
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah, so we call them revenue teams
Yeah.
RevOps,
at Impact, my agency, and we believe strongly in that. I would say that one could argue there's always a place for somebody that's sales specific and somebody that's marketing specific. That being said, they shouldn't feel like separate teams per se.
Some of
Maybe
the time
separate specialties,
yeah.
but not teams.
They shouldn't be competing. You tend to find in big organizations
You're exactly
that they're
right, and
competing with
oftentimes
each
they're
other.
That's exactly right. Which is like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
Come on, folks. It's 2022.
Yeah.
How are we still doing this?
Yeah.
It's like the silos are still very, very strong.
Yeah.
And I oftentimes see things where marketing is producing content, and I ask sales, do you even know the content they're producing? They're like, no. Have you ever helped produce any of it? No. And then they look at the content and they're like, I wouldn't even use this because that's really not what I'm dealing with our prospects and customers, right? So that's very, very problematic, which is why sales should be very involved in the, let's call it the editorial process of the content that gets produced on a website, because they've got their ears to the ground, right? They know those questions, worries, fears, concerns, etc. that the marketplace is asking about.
Exactly. They're the people that are actually speaking to the customers. I think the sales and your customer service people are a really, really good source of questions if you're looking
100%.
to create content. And often the marketing people don't remember to speak to them.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, which is why I would argue that, like, if you look at the practicality of this, if you have a sales meeting and at least one person from marketing is not there, then you're probably missing major opportunities.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you have a marketing meetings, and at least one person from sales isn't in the room, you're missing opportunities, and you're going to have miscommunications, right? And we want to do whatever we got to do to prevent that. And oh, by the way, if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, well, I've got a small business, I'm only 2 employees, 3 employees. First of all, you shouldn't be thinking like that anyway, because that's a very myopic almost point of view. Because the idea that you're going to scale at some point. If you're successful as a company, you're not going to be, unless you're some lifestyle business and you don't want to scale whatsoever, and that's totally fine. But most companies, they have to grow in order to continue to succeed. It's very, very hard to stay the exact same size and succeed in a marketplace. You have to grow like a tree. Tree stops growing, it dies. The same is true scientifically for most businesses. This is not my opinion. And so if you're listening to this, a lot of it is you saying, okay, this is where I'm going to be. This is how I have to plan ahead, regardless of the size of my business right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Think like a bigger company almost.
Well, you should. I said something on LinkedIn the other day that annoyed some people, and that's because people don't always understand how this works, and I didn't understand it at one time either. When I was early in, and this is a little bit off track, but I think it's relevant. Early on in my swimming pool company, I was carrying this one brand of fiberglass pool shells. This is before we were manufacturing. I really loved this brand and loved the company. And then suddenly I found out that they could be for sale. And so I approached the owner of the business CEO of the company. I'm like, what is this deal? You guys aren't for sale, are you? He said, Marcus, we're always for sale.
Mhm.
If I'm not creating a sellable business, then I'm not creating the right business.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that I'm going to sell it tomorrow. I'm
Mhm.
always thinking, though, can this business scale and therefore sale? And I'm like, right? It took me some time to understand that, but eventually I did. And I was like, okay, yeah. Because if it's sellable, that means you have systems, that means you have frameworks, that means you have order, that means you have profitability, that means it's not completely dependent on one single person to survive.
Yeah.
There's all these reasons why you'd want to do this. And that's why those people that, occasionally complain to me and say, well, I don't know about that, Marcus. I'm like, there's going to come a day when your lifestyle business won't fit your lifestyle.
Mhm.
And so are you going to have anything to show for the work that you've put into it? And this is something that we should all think about, which, by the way, there's no better way to scale a business, in my opinion, than They Ask You Answer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we're, as a small agency, there's 10 of us, but we get approached. We get approached by, there's a lot of bigger agencies buying smaller agencies just now and that kind of
Yes,
thing
you see
going
that a
on.
lot.
And so, we've got the processes in place. We've got, like, not a content machine, but sort of like a content machine. And we recognize where our strengths are and why we're saleable. And it is down to the They Ask You Answer philosophy. I mean, we've followed it for a long time. I mean, we were probably doing it reasonably well before we read the book. And I read the book and then shared it with the guys and said, hey, you really need to read this. So we've been following the philosophy, and it absolutely works, and it does create value. It creates, even for small businesses, a presence in the marketplace that makes the bigger businesses look at you and say, well, how are these guys killing it the way they are? And then they'll maybe look to go out and acquire.
Well, that's also why it makes you, when you do They Ask You Answer well, first of all, it makes you it makes you appear like you're a much bigger company because you have much bigger influence online. Even when I had the sales line, people would say to me, so, like, how big is your agency? You guys seem really, really big.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we're 3 people. It's like literally what it was at the time.
Yep.
And that's the power, that's the power of the content. And then if you look at the River Pools example, because of what we did with They Ask You Answer, it exploded us in Virginia, where we started, and then I expanded to Maryland, and then I said, well, I can't really expand anymore to install the pools. How could I expand further? Because I'm getting leads from all over the country that I can't do anything with but maybe sell, and I don't want to sell the leads because that doesn't feel good. And so I said, well, what if we started manufacturing pools? So then we started manufacturing pools, and we could have dealers all over the country. And what was really wild is we didn't even need regional sales reps like most manufacturers, because the influence that we had created with the end user online, they wanted a river pool so much that they were the regional sales reps.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to the local pool builder and saying, I want a river pool. Do you carry a river pool? Well, no, I'm sorry. We don't carry a river pool. Okay, well, then fine. I'm not going to get a pool from you. Do you know who does carry a river pool? You want to talk about, I'm getting a call that day from that dealer saying, hey, how do I carry your product, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really amazing how it allowed us to scale so very much. And I never could have done that had we just been, doing nothing but paid advertising or many of these other short-term, less organic, less long-term strategies, right? But this to me is the gift that keeps on giving. That's what's so wonderful about it. And one thing too I got to say about content production in general, and any of this digital stuff that we do, it's tough at first, right? At first it feels like you're rolling that snowball up the hill, but eventually it crests that hill. And when it crests that hill, there's one day, if you just push hard enough, it'll start to go by itself, and then it just keeps going and rolling down the hill and growing and growing. And that's the momentum that River Pools has been in for a while, and that's what's possible for any organization if they have the right mindset.
How long did it take you from starting to write these blog posts to actually seeing something happen?
This is one of the most common questions, I think, when it comes to content marketing, producing content online, and certainly with They Ask You Answer too. Now, the big mistake that I hear a lot of marketers say is, well, if you're going to really see success with content marketing, it's going to take you a year or more. That is so not a good answer, and it's not accurate either. And it means they don't fully understand what we're talking about. And so let me help everybody really catch this vision. When you do They Ask You Answer Well, you start with the most fundamental questions your sales team gets all the time. Okay, so when you do that and you're producing text content, video content that's addressing those, this literally helps your sales team the moment the first article or video is produced. It actually helps before that, because if the sales team's helping produce it, believe it or not, one of the major benefits, and we'll call it that benefits of producing content the right way, that They Ask You Answer way, that many companies don't understand. They just don't see it like this, is when you have your subject matter experts help them produce content, they get better at being subject matter experts. They become cleaner with the messaging, right? So if a salesperson today helps you produce a video that answers a particular question, that forces them to get better at their job. It's really beautiful. They become better communicators, right? Better
100%.
subject matter experts. And they're better, therefore, with prospects and customers. But let's say I'm a sales professional and I have, I've got this article or video that just came out that really helps explain cost for my particular product or service. And now, because I have that video, I can send it to the prospect before the initial sales call. And therefore, before the sales call, they're really learning about pricing and what drives cost up and down, and why some companies are expensive, why some companies are cheap, and they have a much better sense as to what we charge. And they love that, because they've never gotten that from anybody, and they're so impressed with that, right? By the time I get there, our ability to move much faster in the sales process is significantly greater, because their trust is higher and because they know more. And so what happens is, if somebody's doing They Ask You Answer Well, they immediately integrate content into the sales process, which means two things. Number one, closing rates go up and sales cycles go down. And that's the immediate benefit. And so that can and should happen within 30 days of producing your first articles and videos, within 30 days. Now, in terms of what Google does, right? Well, Google is going to be longer term in terms of search. Now, if you're producing the right content, it can happen pretty fast, especially in certain industries that are less, let's call, saturated. In the book, I use this phrase called CSI, which is Content Saturation Index. And every industry has a different level of content saturation. As you all well know, the agency space, marketing agency, there's a lot of saturation there. It's very, very difficult to make headway when it comes to Google search, because there's been so much content produced out there, right? And you take other industries, especially certain niche industries or B2B industries, and then suddenly you can just dominate manufacturing spaces because there's a lot less content. So the time frame of Google giving you the search love is really contingent on that CSI. But even still, beyond search, you have to remember this too. The moment you start producing great content, especially the Ask You Answer style, because remember, the Ask You Answer style content is completely obsessed with the questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns the buyer is thinking, asking, and searching, right? The stuff that many of your competitors have never even thought about producing. Well, if you do that, it means as soon as they come to your website and they see it there, it's going to be a much better user experience. And so because the user experience is better, your leads are naturally going to go up, because when they're vetting you online, they're much more inclined to reach out. And so again, people say to me, well, what if our industry is just absolutely saturated in that? It's just like we're competing against the best of the best, which I've never seen a situation where somebody didn't have major wins with search by doing They Ask You Answer. But let's assume for a second you were going against River Pools, which, by the way, even still, you can beat River Pools, or at least you can compete highly with them, because there's plenty of stuff that we haven't addressed. And oh, by the way, there's plenty of room on top for everybody else. Even still, it's worth it from a UX standpoint on your website to create some really special feeling. And last point I'll say about this is, when somebody comes to your site, do they immediately say, oh my goodness, I feel like I've come to the promised land. Everything I've ever wanted to know, I've learned from these people right here. Do they leave wanting, or do they leave satiated? And that's the power of the They Ask You Answer website.
Yeah, and I think the other gift, if you like, that content brings to the table is when people ask questions in other environments, you've got answers that you can share with them. So, for example, in social media, if you've done a podcast or you've done a video, you've written a blog post, and you can see a conversation go on, you can just drop it right in there. We've even started sharing educational content in our proposals. We use an online tool. You guys probably do the same. And we embed videos and we embed podcasts into proposals. Now, all right, a lot of people are just going to read through the thing and want to talk. They're not going to want to invest the time. But it's there if they want it. They can see the depth of knowledge. They can see, what we feel, or what we think about their business, our business. I'm trying to avoid using the word passionate because I don't like it, but I'm going to say they can see our passion. And they can see that we're invested,
And they trust
100%.
more, don't they? Because they can see that we know what we're talking about. So it gives them that trust maybe more than someone who just says, like, here's a price.
Yeah, and they see that you've put in the work, right? That you've put your money where your mouth is, if you will. What's interesting, I try to teach this to organizations, and it's hard for them sometimes to understand this at first, but the rights of a teacher are greater than he or she who does not teach.
Okay.
And so when you have really taken the time to produce content that's teaching the world, you have the ability to use it, leverage it, and ask things of your customers and potential customers that other people couldn't do. They couldn't say, they couldn't ask, right? That's because you are the teacher. You're the authority. You are the voice. And that goes a long ways. It's really smart what you're saying too. There's a lot of other benefits to really producing this they ask you answer style content that many people don't even think about. They think just straight like, I want more Google traffic, but it goes way beyond that. If you'd have a great they ask you answer site that answers all the questions somebody could have about your service, product, etc., this is incredible for recruiting. We've seen many people say, Marcus, I mean, the sales and marketing gains were great, but the greatest gains were I attracted some of the best employees I've ever had because of They Ask You Answer, which is crazy. I mean, that's really, really cool to see. And then there's the gains of the person that comes to me and says, Marcus, because we answered these questions so well on our website through text and video, for years I knew I should produce some type of training manual for my sales team. This became the training manual for my sales team, our company content, right? Because producing this content, it's essentially writing the gospel according to you, right? Yeah. According to you, your company, your team. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to have that. And I think every company needs the gospel according to them.
So that leads nicely on to something I was jotting down as we were talking. Marketing are producing all this fantastic content. So people are way well along with their journey about making a product or a service decision to buy by the time they hit the sales guys. So do you think that salespeople need to be better subject matter experts in the modern era than they used to be? Because, there's a danger. I mean, you could walk into a car showroom, you're going to buy a new car. If you're anything like me, you pretty much know everything about that car before you walk in. And if you say to the salesperson, so does this one have the paddle gears, for example, and the guy's like, I'm not sure, I'll just go and see, and they're on the back foot straight away, aren't they? So do you think it's the rights, good salespeople? Sorry, go on.
There's a big issue here.
Yeah.
I think every single person that's listening to this right now has been in a situation over the last year or two where they went in looking for a product, a service, a company, whatever, and they immediately recognized they knew more than the salesperson did.
Yeah.
Right. And this is very problematic. Salespeople have never needed to be more of a subject matter expert than they are today because the bar has been so stinking raised. And a lot of them have excuses as to why they can't necessarily keep up with it, but that doesn't matter because we as the buyer, we just do not care in that moment. If we feel like, most of us can tell within the first 30 seconds if we know more or less than the salesperson. That never happened 30 years ago, pre-internet. Pre-internet, rarely ever did we know more than the salesperson. But if we know more and we immediately recognize it, it really doesn't matter what they say next. Their authority is nothing in our eyes. Yeah. That sounds very harsh, but it's true. Yep. Yeah. Because this is the psychology that we all experience. And so I think to your point though, David, companies need to do a much better job of making sure that the subject matter expertise is at a high level. The idea of helping produce content very much lends to that, right? Because now if let's say you do kitchen appliances, and you're like, well, geez, as a salesperson, I got so many kitchen appliances. This is true. You got to know about a lot. But let me tell you, if you're producing review videos every single day about those appliances that you're selling, you're going to be the smartest guy on the block.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Ain't nobody going to come in that knows more than you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about SEO? Because we talk a lot to our clients about SEO, which, or they ask us for SEO and we end up talking about content. So when you were producing the content right back at the beginning, were you thinking about SEO at all, or were you just answering questions?
Here's what's interesting about it. If we look, Julie, at what Google is, right, and boil it down, the obsession of Google is to give you the best, most specific, relevant answer to your question as quickly as possible,
Exactly.
right? And when I say your question, your search, your question, your query, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so that's been their obsession now, other than like making money and rule the world, which are side items. But
That as well.
that's been their obsession for, since the beginning, for the most part of Google. Now, anybody that has approached their content strategy from that angle, from that lens, they have tended to be very successful. That's why They Ask You Answer really is, and I don't say this in a braggadocious way. I say it because it's true. It is far and away the foremost SEO strategy that's ever been built, because it's timeless. It's not going to go away. It doesn't, over the years, when there was, the next Google update, the algorithm change, whatever, right? The penguins and the pandas back in the day.
Yeah.
I remember celebrating every time, thinking, oh, good,
Mm-hmm.
my clients are going to crush more because some of these other
Yeah.
metrics that should have never have been metrics in search are going to go by the wayside.
Yep.
Yeah, we're the same.
I do, though, think that there are a lot of hacks to elements of search. And let me just give you some examples, right? One of the things that we talk about in the book a lot is the Big Five. And so the Big Five are the 5 subjects that buyers research the most, customers research, businesses tend to not want to talk about them. And they're cost questions, problems questions or negatives, comparison-based questions like versus, reviews, and best. So
Yeah.
anybody that's listening to this right now, many times you've searched for cost or price of something online. You've searched for negatives or problems of something online. You've compared something online. You've looked for reviews of something online. If you've researched the best or the most or the top or the whatever the thing is, the least. These are the Big Five. They run the economy, the internet economy. They run it. Now, most businesses aren't willing to talk about them, which is incredibly naive and short-sighted, but some businesses are. Now, when you start to really learn how this works, you start stacking Big Five. And I'd stack Big Fives all the time together. And so, for example, I might say a review of the 5 best swimming pool companies in Richmond, Virginia, right? So those are 2 of the Big Five right there, reviews and best. They're together. So I did go into a lot of things thinking, I would, another example, fiberglass versus concrete pools, which is the best type of pool for me, right? Once again, stacking the 2. So I thought about search a lot, but what's interesting is if you read the book, it doesn't feel like it's a book about search engine optimization, but it is. I mean, it is, but I wanted people to get almost a master class in SEO without knowing they had a master class in SEO.
I like that. Yeah. People tend to think that SEO is some sort of techie kind of magic thing. And it's not. It's about answering people's questions and giving Google what it wants. Because Google just wants to answer people's questions, doesn't it?
The thing I always have to remind people, though, when it comes to this is just be more specific, right? Because remember, Google wants to give you the best, most specific, relevant answer to your question.
Yep.
So the classic example of the book is I wrote an article, was one of the first in the entire world to write an article on how much does a fiberglass pool cost? I was the first. And that article since that time has done over $20 million in revenue for the company. Now, if I had written an article, how much does a pool cost? that would have been a $20+ million mistake because I was missing one word, right?
Yeah.
And the word was fiberglass, right?
Yeah.
So if I had missed that word, it would have cost me millions and millions of dollars. So I always just tell people, lean towards more, not less specific when it comes to the way you're producing your content.
Okay.
And
That's
by the
good
way,
advice.
that aligns with the way that we search today too, though, right? Because over the
Yeah.
course of the last 25 years of searching on the internet, we've all become more, not less specific. Nobody searches the word pools anymore.
Mhm.
No, that's
Otherwise,
right.
they're going to get terrible results. We have learned what renders better outcomes is specificity. So therefore, specificity also renders better outcomes when we're producing content.
It's an interesting point because quite often I've gone and found something online and people have said, well, I searched, I couldn't find that. And I show them how I searched, and it was a search string. I'm holding my hands up in a podcast.
Yeah.
Clever, smart move, Dave. But it was a long string of words. It was a whole
that's right.
sentence, and then it threw up stuff, and then I started drilling in from there. And that's how I use it, and that's why I can find stuff that sometimes other people can't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I think that comes back to the idea that great content trumps everything else, because we're not against technical SEO, we're not against Core Web Vitals, we're not against some of the analytics tools that we use, but I think, I'm interested to hear what you think as well, obviously, but I think that great content can pretty much trump everything else. It's almost like, as you keep saying, Google is trying to provide great answers to people who are asking questions. That's how it generates its revenue through advertising, etc. So if you're producing that great content, a lot of the other things that you maybe aren't getting right can be kind of forgiven.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, let's say you've got all the technical sides, right, but you don't have the great content. Are you going to make sales? No. Are you going to keep people on your website? No. Are you going to be able to use the content in the sales process? No. But if the content's great, if it's done in the They Ask You Answer way, you're going to be able to do all those things. And the Google Lords will be more forgiving of some of the technicalities that might be falling short on your website.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it. That's the reality of it. So I do think there's, we don't want to be lazy when it comes to SEO and technical SEO, but the fact of the matter is 90 to 95% of SEO is really understanding the way people search, the way you search, being specific in the way they do it, in the way you do it, and then answering the question as well as you can. And that will cover 95% of your bases there.
Which, when you say it, like you said earlier, when you say that, it's like, it's so obvious, isn't it? But people kind of overlook it and maybe overcomplicate. And it's like, no, just, stick to the basics.
Yeah, I think people don't want to admit that they haven't put the energy that's required into their content. I mean, as an agency,
it's really hard work, isn't it?
We all know how hard it is to get content off customers. Yeah. I mean, it's just sometimes impossible. I mean, what would you say to businesses who push back a bit with content marketing and the idea of content because they don't want to give away the crown jewels? I mean, that's maybe a UK term, but they don't want to give away all the good stuff. We can't possibly put this information on our website because this is it's a secret. We're not going to share it with people.
We don't want our competitors to find it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, most people's secret sauce is an absolute joke. Because when everybody says we have a secret sauce, I love to say, do you have anybody that works for you that's ever worked for any of your competitors, or do your competitors have any of the employees that have ever worked for you? And the simple answer to that question is over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. There are very little secrets in most industries. And the way I describe it to people is, at this point, as buyers and consumers, we want to see the sandwich made in front of us. We really do. Yeah. And so if we're able to see the thing, we can believe the thing, we can appreciate the thing, we can value the thing. And so let's not get caught up in this idea of secret sauce. That is a myth for most companies far and away.
Yep.
They also say things like, well, if we tell them everything on the website, they won't phone us up. So we've got nothing to tell them. They won't phone up because they know everything already. Sometimes it's
one of the
really- there's
stories I
these
love to
sort of-
share
yeah.
regarding that one, Julie, is there's this company in the U.S. I don't think they're in the U.K., but they're called the Geek Squad. And what they do is a very big company that fixes computers for people, right?
Yep.
They're, geeks, nerds, things like that. And so they have a great website that answers a lot of these questions. And so somebody went to the CEO and said, why are you answering all these questions? Aren't you like hurting your business? And the CEO laughed and said, don't you realize my number one customer is the one that tries to fix it themselves, right?
Yes.
It's like, right? And plus, look, if you went to 5 websites, all 5 of them say, yeah, we can fix that, but one of them shows you how to fix it. Which one are you going to call?
Totally.
It's just so obvious, right?
Mhm.
And so, the last thing I'll say about this is, if they don't learn it from you, who are they going to learn it from?
Yeah.
So this is the choice that we all can make.
Mhm.
They can either learn it from you and you can own the conversation, or they can learn it from your competitors. But
Yep.
the idea that I'm just going to hide it and then allow them to learn from my competitors makes me want to vomit. I'm not okay with that.
No, I
No
agree.
way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's a good way of answering that. Yeah.
So, just moving on a little bit, and how has the content marketing space, other than the sheer volume of content that's now being produced, has it changed in any fundamental way since They Ask You Answer was written?
That's a really good question, David. I don't think it's changed very much.
Okay.
Because I haven't, I'm literally doing, people 10 years ago when I started teaching They Ask You Answer, they said, this isn't going to make it. It's like, okay. That's like saying trust isn't going to be a big part of your business in 20 years.
yeah.
What a stupid thing to say,
Mhm.
right? Because this much I know. Trust is a principle that's never going away. It's always going to be core to our business success going forward. What's not core are platforms. Platforms come and go.
Yep.
So you build a business on a platform like a Facebook or like an Instagram, then you could have problems. Just like I looked this week and Instagram's getting rid of hashtags, people freaking out. I'm like,
Okay.
right? It's like, hello, this is it's no different than if you look at search for a second. Link building eventually will not correlate with search engine results.
Mhm.
In other words,
Sooner the better.
links. Because if you think about it, it is something that can be gamed.
Yep.
And so if it can be gamed, ultimately Google is going to find a way. Maybe it's going to be their AI that figures this out, but they're going to find a way to not be reliant on outside signals and indicators.
Yep.
Yeah,
Only
let's hope so.
true quality of experience. Eventually, that's going to be their algorithm is going to be based on one thing eventually. True quality of experience.
Mhm.
All the other stuff that currently affects search eventually will not affect search. And so if you have that mindset, you're much more built to last. That's why 10 years ago when everybody was doing really stupid link building techniques, I was like, this ain't going to last.
Mhm.
It don't smell right. It don't look right. It don't
Absolutely.
taste right. And I ain't going to touch it. And a lot of those companies ended up paying the price
Oh,
for
yeah.
their sins later on, right? I'm sure you all have seen some of those
Sure.
Oh,
those,
we've seen
organizations
some
over time.
absolute horrors. Yeah.
Private blog networks and all these kind of things.
Well, that's right.
Terrible
Come on.
stuff.
Let's think. We've got to think long term. We've got to think long term here, and that's why, if I say to somebody, "Do you think answering your customers' questions and being seen as a teacher, being seen as an expert, being the trusted voice, is that fundamental to you in 5, 10, 15 years?" Everybody that has a brain is going to say yes.
Mhm.
And with that, okay, we know They Ask You Answer is going to have legs for a long, long time. Again, this is why the book is selling more today than it did 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just I kind of think I know the answer to this question. It's an obvious question to ask, but we get asked it. How do people with boring businesses do content marketing? The people that genuinely
Sure.
believe that
Right. How does
nobody's
an
looking for
accounting firm
information.
embrace video, right? Because they're like, and trust me, accounting firms are pretty boring. Like on their surface, I've spoken at accounting conferences. They're boring. All right? They could do a lot better with those. With that being said, here's what's not boring: spending my money. Okay.
Mhm.
And so the moment somebody is getting ready to spend money, that they value,
Yeah.
and for 99% of people, they value their money. Well, all of a sudden, that thing becomes very sexy. It's very interesting, right? I've even had people tell me before, I'm like, man, it's like, how did you do this in an industry that's not very sexy? Like, pools is not very sexy. I'm like, have you ever seen a two-piece? But I mean, I think pools are really sexy, but people actually say this is what they say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so anytime anyone is spending any money, there is much interest, very sexy. And so then you have to say to yourself, okay, what do they want to know? What are the questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns? Because somebody can get excited, as excited about choosing the right accounting firm
Mm-hmm.
as they could choosing their next vehicle. And someone listening to this might say, there's no way. No, because the psychology is the same. I've got worries, I got fears, I got questions. I don't want to screw this up. There's
Yep.
a lot of money. I hate doing my taxes. Like, how can I find someone that is going to help me with this and going to take me to the promised land so I don't have to have this pain and stress anymore? It's a
Mhm.
big, big deal, right? So I would just ask everyone, please, please do not call your industry boring or unsexy, any of those, because it absolutely has major value to the person in the moment that has that particular problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah. Couldn't agree
yeah.
more.
I
Couldn't
like
agree
that. I
more.
like that.
Have you got anything on your bank of questions there?
No, you stole one of mine.
Okay. I'm not sure if we're coming to the end of the conversation, but Marcus, could you just tell us a bit more about where you are now and the vehicles that you use and the services that you offer and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's been a fun ride. I've been able to see now hundreds of companies and assist hundreds of companies become that most trusted voice of their space, explode their sales and marketing leads and activities, and ultimately their revenue through They Ask You Answer. And so our company, Impact, it helps organizations implement They Ask You Answer. And just like a company might help you implement Traction or EOS
Yeah.
or Scaling Up or some of these other types of systems that you see out there,
Yeah.
we do that today. And so we're coaches, consultants, trainers. That's what we do. And unlike most agencies, we do not produce any content. We do not do any services. So we're not a good fit for everybody.
Mm.
The way we do it is we empower you to learn how to do these things in-house. And it's a really beautiful model. And I actually believe it's the future of the way agencies need to think in order to be profitable. I don't think services for agencies will continue to be the future.
Mm.
I think because AI will always find a way to devalue
Yep.
common activities. But what AI is not going to do is they're not going to become a world-class coach and consultant
Yeah.
for an organization. And I think this is where agencies need to go to stay ahead of it and to be very profitable, because I think you can see the greatest returns that way. And so I've got that. I'm continuing to produce content and books. I've got a book coming out with Phil Jones later this year, who wrote Exactly What to Say. And
Okay.
so it's the love child of Exactly What to Say plus They Ask You Answer.
That
Look
sounds
forward to
So
interesting.
that.
it's going to be a really good book, and it's going to be specific to websites.
Okay.
So if you can imagine that, I don't want to spill the beans on the title, but if you put all those things I just said together, you'll come up with a title probably. And
We'll look out for it.
yeah, and hopefully I'm going to be in the UK a couple times, speak this year. Quite
Oh, that's
excited
good.
about
Have
that.
you got any details on that just now? Or is
Yeah,
it
well, I'm
still
trying to do a specific They Ask You Answer conference in the UK
fantastic?
because
Oh,
there's so many
brilliant.
practitioners there, and so I
Yeah.
want to do just for that. I'll be at the Entrepreneur Circle later this year in September with Nigel's team, but I'm going to try to do an event that's just They Ask You Answer for the Ask You Answer practitioners in the UK, because they deserve it, and they're the best of the best.
Mm.
Oh, that'll be
And
popular, I'm sure.
and I would just say one other thing for those people that are listening to this right now. Make sure you follow me on LinkedIn, because I'm a really good follow, and
Yeah.
I put my best
Vouch for
content
that.
on LinkedIn. So I don't have a personal blog today. I blog, if you will. I put my best thoughts each day on LinkedIn. And in fact, as we've been talking today, I wrote down a couple thoughts. That's why I like to do it sounds silly, but the biggest reason why I do podcasts a day is because people ask me questions that will stimulate something within me
Yeah.
that makes me say, oh, I hadn't thought about that for a while, or, that I was passionate about that thing. Let me write more on that. And so I'll take something that you all have asked me today and I'll turn it into a piece of content on LinkedIn. And I do that at least 300 times a year. And so if you really want to, connect with me, that's the best place by far is LinkedIn.
Yeah, they're always good posts. There's always sort of something to think about, I think, in there.
What we'll do is we'll put in the show notes on fromthecoalface.com, we'll put in a link to the book. We'll put in a link, not an affiliate link, a link to the book on Amazon. And we'll put in a link to your LinkedIn profile and obviously Impact as well for anybody that wants to get in touch. They can get in through that. I know this is always asked. Is there anything we haven't asked that you're thinking, guys, wow, how did you not ask this?
Well, I would just say for the person that's listening to this right now, don't be intimidated by this stuff, folks, and do not overcomplicate it. Besides that, it's wasteful thinking, right? I didn't have the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world from jump. I had a business that was going over the edge.
Yep.
And my simple goal was produce one piece of content a day until I either lose the business or I save it. And that's how we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. That's what changed my life. And it led me to a place of incredible financial peace. It allowed me to travel the entire world. They say the phrase oftentimes, we often overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 10. And that is incredibly, incredibly true. Almost 10 years ago, I'm in a place of near bankruptcy. Now it's 13 years ago, but near bankruptcy. And today I own multiple businesses. I've had a few exits at this point, and it's just a stunning turn of events as to what can happen. I'd also say that the beauty of understanding they ask you answer and what we've talked about is your competitors are still not going to do this. So
it's amazing, isn't it?
Whatever industry you're in,
it
doesn't matter. They're probably not going to do this. So you're only competing, if you do they ask you answer, you're competing with 5%.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good deal, folks. And there's room on top for all you in the 5%. So don't for a second say it's too late. No, we're just getting going. It's very exciting times, especially when it comes to video. There's so much to do with video still, my friends. I've got a book on that as well. It's called The Visual Sale. It came out about 1.5 years or so ago, and it's just very specific to video. And so, and the last thing I'll say too is, we get told sometimes you should be everywhere. Be everywhere. Be on this platform. Be on that. That's stupid advice ever.
Yeah.
Don't be everywhere because you're not going to be. There's a reason why you're not going to find me on Instagram. There's a reason why you're not going to find me on Facebook. Other than the fact that I don't feel like they're very uplifting. I am not there because I want to be the best in the world on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm on LinkedIn. And so oftentimes we try to be a jack of all social media trades and we end up being a master of none. So you're much better off being a master of one. Know what that one thing is. Focus on it. As Jim Collins would say in Good to Great, find out what your hedgehog concept is when it comes to that platform, that media that you want to use. At River Pools, at first, it was textual content, and then it became YouTube content. And eventually, we started to introduce social media. I didn't do social media for 6 or 7 years at River Pools. And that's why you don't hear me talk a lot about social, because social's fine, but social is rarely foundational. Foundational is the way we teach, right, and the way we engender trust. Social is platform-centric, and so it's going to come in, it's going to go. So hopefully those are some final thoughts for those that are listening. And if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, my personal email is marcus@marcussheridan.com. Marcus@marcussheridan.com, Sheridan. That's a good Irish last name there. And so feel free to reach out anytime and ask me questions that you might have had as you were listening to this, but you just didn't feel like I fully answered.
Fantastic.
That's great. Thanks for that.
It's been an absolute pleasure. If you want to come on to From the Coalface and talk about any aspect of digital marketing, talk about your business, talk about anything related to growing a business, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got any questions, you can find them in from FromTheCoalface.com or RedEvolution.com. In the meantime, Marcus, it's been a pleasure. If anybody hasn't read They Ask, You Answer, then you need to read it. It's a fantastic read. It's a very easy read, very accessible. We covered this when we were talking earlier, and it's kind of one of those you can't put down type books. I think I said previously, I particularly enjoy audiobooks, and I listened to the audiobook version of it, which I loved, and I keep going back to it as well. So I think that's everything from myself and Julie.
Yeah,
Marcus,
brilliant
thanks
advice.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.